Her voice was almost gone when the storm carried it away. A young woman, shivering and alone, lay half buried in the snow as the cold slowly stole the life from her body. There was no one on the road, no light in the distance, and for a moment she believed this was how her story would end. But God placed one quiet man on that path, a Marine returning home with his own grief, his own wounds, and a heart still learning how to heal. He did not hesitate. He knelt beside a stranger and gave her the warmth and strength she no longer had. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Snowfall drifted across the Montana runway like slow-moving feathers under a dim winter sky, heavy enough to blur the outlines of the distant pine trees, but soft enough to feel almost peaceful. As the plane taxied toward the terminal, Ethan Caldwell pressed his palm against the window, feeling the familiar cold of home seep into his skin. He was a tall man with the build of a seasoned Marine, broad-shouldered with a deliberate way of moving that came from years of training. His face was sharply cut, with a strong jaw, faint stubble, and deep-set blue eyes that carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who had seen too many things without speaking of them. He had not come home because he wanted rest. He had come because his father was gone, and the land his family had owned for generations had been left in a tangle of problems waiting for him to untie. Inside the small timberline airport, warm lights glowed softly over travelers bundled in thick coats. Ethan stepped through the doors, the scent of coffee and old wood filling his senses, when a familiar voice boomed across the room. It belonged to Ben Callahan, a stocky man in his early 30s with a thick beard and a weathered brown jacket that looked permanently dusted with sawdust. Ben was a mechanic who had worked at the same garage since high school. His dark blonde hair curled beneath his beanie, and he carried a kind of grounded warmth in the way he moved. Life had not been easy on him, especially after losing his mother 2 winters ago, but it had carved him into someone steady and fiercely loyal. When he saw Ethan, he hurried forward and pulled him into a rugged hug. "Look at you," Ben said, stepping back to study him with friendly disbelief. "Still built like a brick wall. I thought the Marines would have softened you by now." Ethan managed a small smile. "They tried." Ben's expression sobered. "I heard about your dad. I really am sorry." Ethan nodded once. He did not trust his voice enough to respond. Ben was quick to fill the silence. "Come on. My truck is outside. Storm is rolling in, and you don't want to be driving these roads alone at night." Ethan did not argue. The thought of renting a car, of explaining anything to anyone else, felt heavier than the duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Ben had always been the sort who stepped in when others hesitated, a habit born from being the oldest of 5 siblings in a home that demanded responsibility long before childhood was over. Outside, the wind clawed at their coats. Snowflakes whirled in frantic circles around the dim parking lot lights. Ben's old Ford pickup groaned awake when he turned the key, and the heater sputtered before filling the cabin with uneven, warm air. The 2 men began the drive north toward the Caldwell cabin, a lonely wooden structure nestled at the edge of the forest where Ethan had grown up. The truck's headlights cut a narrow tunnel of visibility through the swirling white. For a long stretch, neither man spoke. Ethan watched the landscape blur by, remembering how he and his father used to ride horses across these fields. His father had been a large man with strong hands and a slow, patient smile, someone who believed in hard work, honesty, and never rushing through life. Losing him had felt like losing the last anchor holding Ethan to the ground. Ben cleared his throat, the sound loud in the quiet truck. "You here to fix the property stuff?" "Yeah," Ethan replied. Some paperwork went wrong after he passed. Boundaries and signatures and things he always handled. I need to sort it out. Ben nodded with a sympathetic frown. He kept that land like it was part of his soul. He did, Ethan said softly. The storm thickened. Snow began to lash against the windshield in tight horizontal streaks, and Ben tightened his grip on the steering wheel. We should slow down. These roads are turning into ice. Ethan leaned forward slightly, instincts tightening inside him. Something in the moving blur of the storm felt wrong, as if the world ahead was hiding something. Ben, he murmured, stop the truck. Ben reacted instantly, easing the truck to a cautious halt. The headlights illuminated something ahead, half swallowed by drifting snow. It looked like a carriage, tipped sideways in the ditch. One wooden wheel was splintered, and the harness hung limply across a patch of frozen ground. Ethan was already reaching for the door handle. I will check, he said. Ethan, wait, Ben started. But Ethan was already out in the storm, the wind striking him with an icy ferocity that stole his breath. His boots sank deep as he trudged forward. Then he saw her. A woman lay in the snow beside the broken carriage. Her dark coat was coated in frost, her long brown hair tangled and shining white from the cold. She appeared in her late 20s, with delicate features that were now pale and strained, as if life itself was slipping from her fingertips. Her slender figure shivered weakly, and her untouched face suggested a background of someone raised with gentleness and refinement. Her gloved hand reached out blindly, and her lips trembled from cold and fear. Ethan knelt beside her. Ma'am, can you hear me? Her eyes fluttered open. They were a warm brown, soft, but clouded with disorientation. Her voice came out cracked and faint. Please, do not leave me. I am here, Ethan replied firmly, lifting her into his arms in one smooth motion. She felt impossibly light, her body cold in a way that frightened him. Her head fell against his shoulder, and he could feel the shallow rhythm of her breathing. Ben ran toward them, his boots kicking up snow. Is she alive? Barely, Ethan said. We need warmth. Together they moved quickly back to the truck. Ethan slid into the back seat with the woman in his arms, holding her close to the heater vents. Her fingers twitched, curling, weakly around the fabric of his coat. He gently brushed melting snow from her face, and her eyes opened again, studying him with a fragile mixture of fear and trust. You are safe, Ethan whispered. I have you. Stay awake. Her lips moved, forming a single word that barely passed the sound of the storm. Cold. I know, Ethan said. I am keeping you warm. As the truck lurched forward again, pushing toward the Caldwell cabin, Ethan watched her eyelids drift closed, her shivering slowly easing. Something within him shifted, a quiet pull he did not entirely understand. He had rescued many people in chaotic places, but this felt different. The storm had not given him a stranger tonight. It had given him someone whose presence stirred a part of him that had been silent for years. He looked at her again, her breath light against his chest, and he felt a certainty forming gently inside him. This night would change everything. A heavy silence wrapped around the cabin as the storm continued its assault outside, the wind dragging icy fingers across the wooden walls. Inside, dim firelight flickered over the room, casting long, moving shadows across the floor. Ethan Caldwell carried the unconscious young woman deeper inside, his arms steady even though he felt her trembling through her soaked coat. He set her gently on the old couch near the fireplace, the same couch where he had fallen asleep countless nights as a boy, while his father read late into the winter. The woman, Claire, looked frighteningly fragile as she lay there. Her features were delicate, with soft eyebrows and long, dark lashes now clumped with melting snow. Her skin was pale but naturally warm-toned, the kind of complexion that would glow easily in sunlight, but had turned nearly white in the cold. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest at the sight. She looked like someone who belonged to a different world, one far removed from broken carriages and violent storms. Ethan moved quickly. He threw logs into the fireplace and struck a match. Flames crackled to life, painting the room with gold. He removed Claire's soaked gloves and boots, noticing the elegant stitching on her coat and the shape of her small hands. Not a ranch worker, not someone used to fighting the cold. She seemed like someone raised with gentle things, perhaps in a wealthy household where winter was admired through windows rather than endured face to face. Ben Callahan hurried to the kitchen, his boots stomping on the wooden floor. He found a kettle, filled it, and set it on the old iron stove. Ben was a practical man, his movements efficient. His face, covered in a thick, sandy beard, reflected steady concern. Life had carved him into someone responsible early on, especially after his mother died from a sudden illness when he was 20. Since then, he had taken care of his younger siblings, learning to stay calm even in storms like this. Ethan knelt beside Claire and gently touched her forehead. She stirred slightly, her breath uneven. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing warm brown irises that glimmered weakly in the firelight. She tried to sit up, but her body resisted. "You are safe now," Ethan said quietly. "You are inside my family cabin. You were caught in the storm." Claire blinked, her vision clearing slowly. Her lips parted as if to speak, but she could not find the strength yet. Ben returned with a steaming cup. "Here," he said gently, his deep voice calm. "Warm tea. It will help." Ethan supported Claire's back, lifting her slightly so she could drink. Her fingers were still trembling as she held the cup with both hands. She took a slow sip, then another. A faint flush appeared on her cheeks, the first sign of warmth returning. "What happened out there?" Ben asked, pulling a chair close. His eyebrows drew together with concern but also curiosity. Claire's voice came out soft, almost brittle. "The horse, he panicked. Something in the storm frightened him. The wheel broke. I tried to walk, but the wind, I could not see." Ethan studied her expression. Her eyes shifted downward, as if hiding something deeper than a broken carriage. There was a kind of sadness behind her words, something not caused by the storm. "How far were you trying to go?" Ethan asked. Claire hesitated. She ran her fingers along the edge of the cup, thinking. "Not far. I just needed air. Time to think." She paused, then added quietly, "I left without telling anyone." Ben raised an eyebrow. "Did someone upset you?" Claire smiled faintly but without joy. "Not exactly. Sometimes the walls of home feel smaller than they look." Ethan understood more from her silence than from her words. He remembered feeling suffocated too, back when he was 18, longing to leave Montana to escape expectations he never asked for. The Marines had given him structure and purpose, but they had also hardened him. Looking at Claire, he sensed she was carrying something different. Pressure from a family that expected perfection, perhaps, or the weight of choices she was not prepared to make. The fire warmed the cabin quickly. Claire pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. Her breathing steadied. Ethan watched her without realizing he was doing so. She had a gentleness about her, but also a strength. The way she tried to hide her fear, the way her eyes brightened even through exhaustion. He wondered who she was before the storm, what kind of life she had left behind for a moment of quiet in the cold. A sudden knock at the door startled them. Ethan stood instantly, his instincts kicking in. He opened the door cautiously. A woman stood outside, holding a lantern against the raging wind. She was in her mid-40s, tall and slender, with silver streaks in her dark hair tied into a loose braid. Her face was sharp but kind, with green eyes that watched everything carefully. She wore a thick gray coat, wool gloves and boots dusted with fresh snow. "I saw the carriage," she said loudly over the howl of the wind. "Is everyone all right?" She introduced herself as Mrs. Harper, a widow who lived half a mile down the road. Her husband had died in a logging accident years ago, leaving her to run her small farm alone. She had become known for her hard-working nature and quiet wisdom. "We found one passenger," Ethan replied. "She is inside." Mrs. Harper stepped in, her boots dripping snow onto the floor. She examined Claire with a practiced eye, gently placing her hand on the young woman's forehead. "Storm took her strength, but she will recover. Good thing you boys found her." Ethan nodded, feeling a sense of relief. Mrs. Harper turned to him with a small, approving smile. "You have your father's instincts. He always helped people first, asked questions later." The mention of his father tightened Ethan's chest, but he nodded respectfully. Claire watched them, quietly, her eyes drifting between Ethan and the newcomer. She whispered, "Thank you, all of you." Mrs. Harper patted her shoulder. "Rest now. Tomorrow you can think. Tonight you survive." As the storm battered the cabin, the four of them stayed within the warm glow of the fire. Claire slowly drifted into sleep, her breathing deep and peaceful. Ethan watched over her, feeling a strange sense of responsibility forming inside him. Something quiet, but firm. Something he could not ignore. He did not know who Claire Whitmore truly was, but he knew the storm had brought her to him for a reason he had yet to understand. A pale winter sun pushed weak rays through the thinning storm, illuminating the cabin windows with a hazy silver glow. Inside, the air felt warmer, calmer than the night before. Claire woke slowly, her eyelashes fluttering as the scent of pine smoke and tea drifted toward her. Her body still ached, but the warmth soaking into her bones felt like a promise that she had survived something larger than the storm itself. Ethan Caldwell sat nearby at the small wooden table, repairing an old leather strap with quiet focus. His bare forearms were flexed from the work, marked by faint scars that traced years of training and service. His face remained calm, but his eyes carried subtle shadows, as if he had not slept much. When he noticed Claire stirring, he lifted his head with gentle concern. "You are awake," he said softly, his voice steady like warm earth. "How do you feel?" Claire pushed herself upright slowly. "Better. Thanks to you all." Her voice, though stronger, still trembled slightly. Ethan stood and helped her adjust the blanket. She observed him quietly. There was something deeply reassuring in the way he moved, controlled but entirely sincere, as if protecting others had become his second nature. She wondered what experiences had carved that into him. Ben Callahan stepped in from outside, brushing snow off his coat. He carried logs stacked against his chest. His beard was dotted with frost, and his breath fogged the air. Despite the cold, he managed a broad grin. "Storm is easing," he said. "Roads still bad, but survivable." Claire noticed the way he carried himself, sturdy and grounded, the kind of man shaped by years of looking after others. Before Ethan could respond, another figure emerged outside the frosted window. A man approached the cabin slowly through the snow, each step deliberate. Ethan stiffened slightly, watching him with narrowed focus. Claire sensed tension immediately. The man knocked once and waited. Ethan opened the door carefully, his posture alert but not confrontational. A stranger stood there, tall and lean with a long coat dusted in snow. He had short, dark hair streaked with gray, a well-kept beard, sharp cheekbones, and a pair of intelligent eyes that studied everything with quiet certitude. His presence felt both calm and commanding. "I am looking for someone," the man said, with a voice deep and smooth, the kind touched by authority and sorrow. "A young woman from town named Claire Whitmore. I was told her carriage was found near here." Claire froze. Her pulse quickened, and a familiar tightening gripped her chest. She knew that voice. "Uncle Rowan," she whispered. Rowan Whitmore stepped inside, relief softening the stern lines of his face. He approached Claire with controlled urgency. Up close, his features were clearer. He appeared in his early 50s, tall with a long frame and an air of experience earned from years of managing difficult people and difficult truths. His jaw was strong, and his deep-set eyes were the kind that saw through excuses. Yet Claire also sensed warmth beneath his stern exterior. Rowan had always carried grief from losing his wife a decade earlier, a loss that made him protective of Claire in a quiet but fierce way. "You frightened us," Rowan said, kneeling beside her. "Your father sent men searching all night. They feared the worst." Claire's gaze lowered. "I needed time. I rushed out. I did not think." Rowan exhaled slowly, the sound mixed with frustration and relief. He placed a gloved hand on her shoulder. "Storms are unforgiving. You were lucky." He turned to Ethan and Ben with a composed nod. "Thank you both. Truly." Ethan nodded back, studying Rowan with guarded respect. "She is safe now. She is warming up. That is what matters." Rowan's expression softened at Ethan's sincerity. Claire watched the exchange, noticing the subtle shift in Ethan's posture. He treated Rowan not as an intruder, but as someone who, like him, carried invisible battles. Ben brewed more tea as Rowan sat near the fire. The warmth made his features less severe, but his eyes still held an unspoken burden. Claire sensed it. Rowan was a man who hid his exhaustion behind duty. "Will you be taking her home now?" Ben asked while pouring. Rowan hesitated. "Yes, but not immediately. Roads are still unsafe and—" He glanced at Claire briefly. "There are matters we must discuss before she returns." Ethan sensed the weight in his tone. "Trouble?" he asked quietly. Rowan tapped his fingers together. "Her family's estate is tense. Business issues. Decisions that need clarity." He didn't elaborate further, but the heaviness in his eyes told enough. Claire looked away, guilt creeping across her face. Ethan noticed. Something inside him shifted, an instinct to protect not just her safety, but the softness in her expression. He felt drawn to her pain in a way he did not understand yet. Rowan studied Ethan more closely. "You are Ethan Caldwell," he said after a moment, recalling the name from older days in town. "Son of Daniel Caldwell." Ethan nodded slowly, surprised Rowan remembered. "Yes, I just returned to settle my father's land." Rowan regarded him with a deeper respect. "Your father was a good man, honest and steady, the kind we could use more of." The sincerity in Rowan's voice struck Ethan unexpectedly, stirring memories he kept tucked away. Claire watched the two men, sensing an unspoken connection between them. Ethan held his father's memory close, guarded like a soldier holds a final letter. Rowan's recognition allowed Ethan to breathe lighter, even if only slightly. The room warmed further as the fire grew brighter. Rowan eventually stood, walking to the window to inspect the fading storm. His tall figure was outlined in pale light, the snow reflecting against his coat like a shifting silver. "We will leave within an hour," he said, quietly, "before the roads freeze again." Claire looked at Ethan, a mixture of gratitude and something softer lingering in her eyes. "Thank you for saving me," she murmured. "If you had not been there." "I was meant to find you," Ethan said, surprised by his own honesty. "Some storms lead us to the places we need to be." Rowan heard the words, but did not comment. Instead, he studied Ethan with a subtle knowing, as if he recognized the beginning of something delicate but undeniable. The storm outside finally weakened to a whisper. Claire stood with Rowan's help, steady but reluctant. She turned once more toward Ethan, her expression carrying a promise of returning, even though no words were spoken. As Rowan guided her out, a faint sunlight broke through the remaining clouds, casting a gentle glow on her face. Ethan watched from the doorway, feeling something stir within him, a pull that felt both new and ancient. He knew the storm had not truly ended. Not for her. Not for him. And somewhere beyond the trees, the next chapter waited with questions yet to be answered. Morning light stretched across the valley, soft and pale, revealing a world gently recovering from the blizzard. Ethan Caldwell walked slowly along the snow-packed trail leading toward his family land, each step stirring memories he had not touched in years. The air carried the scent of pine and wet earth as the sun melted frost from the fence posts. His duffel bag hung over his shoulder, heavy but familiar, echoing years of deployments and homecomings that always felt too brief. He reached the boundary where his father's old sign still leaned slightly in the ground. Caldwell Ranch, the letters carved by his father's steady hand long ago. Ethan touched the weathered wood with his fingertips. A warmth rose in his chest, mixed with a faint ache. The cabin stood ahead, surrounded by drifting snow, its wooden frame still straight but worn, its porch sagging on one side. He approached slowly, feeling the past gather around him like mist. Inside, dust motes drifted in slanted beams of light. The air smelled of cedar and old books from his father's collection. Ethan moved through the rooms, touching walls that held echoes of laughter and arguments, quiet dinners and long nights his father spent reading by the fire. He paused at a shelf where a photo of him and his father sat half-covered in dust. His father had been a broad-shouldered man with deep forehead lines and warm hazel eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Ethan wiped the frame clean, his jaw tightening as guilt pressed into him. He had returned too late to say goodbye, and the weight of that truth dug deep. The sound of crunching snow outside pulled him from his thoughts. He stepped to the doorway, finding a woman approaching through the thinning frost. She walked with a long, purposeful stride, tall and slender, her silhouette framed by the pale sun. As she drew nearer, Ethan recognized her. Sarah Whitmore, Rowan's younger sister and Claire's aunt. He had not seen her since before his deployments. She was a striking woman in her early 40s, with long chestnut brown hair braided loosely over one shoulder. Her skin was pale from winter, and her features sharp but graceful, with thoughtful dark eyes that missed little. She wore a thick wool coat and leather gloves dusted with snow. Sarah carried herself with confidence shaped by years of managing community affairs after becoming widowed young. Her husband had died in a logging accident 10 winters ago, leaving her independent, resilient, and deeply protective of her family. She offered Ethan a small smile as she reached the porch. "I thought I might find you here," she said in a calm and steady voice. "Rowan mentioned you planned to visit the land today." Ethan nodded silently and stepped aside so she could join him. She entered, her gaze drifting over the walls as if piecing together a memory she had once heard from others. She rubbed her gloved hands together. "Your father used to invite the whole town here after harvest season," she said softly. "He had a way of making people feel welcome." "He did," Ethan replied, his voice low. "I hope I do right by him." Sarah studied him a long moment. "Your father was proud of you. He talked about you often." The words landed deeper than she intended. Ethan lowered his eyes, struggling to speak. "I wish I had been here more." "You were serving your country," Sarah said gently. He understood that. They fell into quiet as Ethan placed his bag down and looked over the documents left scattered on the kitchen table. Papers relating to the land, loan statements, and letters from the county office. Sarah stood near him and scanned the documents. Her brows tightened slightly. "This is more complicated than I expected." "What do you know about it?" Ethan asked. Sarah hesitated before answering. "Enough to know you should be careful. There have been rumors about changes in property laws, about businessmen trying to acquire water rights around this valley." She looked at him seriously. "Your father may have been targeted." The words struck like cold water. Ethan leaned closer to the documents, searching for patterns he had overlooked. Sarah examined one letter with him. It bore a signature belonging to a man named Gregory Vance. "Who is he?" Ethan asked. "A land surveyor," Sarah replied. "Mid-50s, tall, thinning gray hair, always wearing that same brown corduroy jacket. He's quiet and polite with most people, but he works closely with men who have money and ambition, often too much ambition." Her voice carried a warning. As if summoned by thought, a truck pulled up outside. The engine rumbled for a moment before shutting off. Ethan and Sarah exchanged a look. Sarah moved to the window, peeking through the frost. "Speak of the devil," she murmured. Gregory Vance approached the cabin with measured steps. Up close, he was exactly as Sarah had described. He was a thin man with narrow shoulders and a long face framed by short gray hair. He wore rectangular glasses and carried a leather satchel. His expression was polite yet distant, as if he kept a part of himself hidden from everyone. Gregory had a habit of tapping his fingers against his thigh while thinking, a nervous gesture formed from years of juggling secrets he wished he never had to keep. Ethan opened the door only slightly. "Can I help you?" Gregory offered a practiced smile. "Afternoon, Mr. Caldwell. I heard you were returning. Came to discuss the paperwork regarding this land." Sarah stepped up behind Ethan, her expression calm but watchful. "Mr. Vance," she said evenly. "Interesting timing." Gregory cleared his throat, briefly adjusting his glasses. "Just routine procedures. I'm sure we can resolve everything easily." Ethan sensed unease beneath Gregory's practiced friendliness. His instincts sharpened, shaped by years in the Marines. He opened the door wider but did not step aside. "Then speak plainly." Gregory hesitated, then pulled a document from his satchel and handed it to Ethan. It stated that parts of Ethan's land were under review for potential redistribution due to environmental assessment concerns. The language was vague, purposely so. Ethan's jaw clenched. "What is this?" "Just standard review," Gregory said, though his voice wavered slightly. "A lot of properties are being evaluated." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes locked onto Gregory. "And who ordered this evaluation?" Gregory hesitated too long. Ethan's voice dropped into something colder. Who, Mr. Vance? Gregory exhaled as if the truth had been dragging him underwater. Investors from out of state. They are pushing to acquire land with water access. Your property is valuable. Sarah crossed her arms. So they want to take his father's land. Gregory shook his head quickly. Not take, negotiate. Ethan stepped closer, his presence suddenly larger, the room seeming to shrink around him. This land is not for sale. Gregory swallowed, his shoulders drooping under the tension. Then prepare. They do not accept refusal easily. Sarah glanced at Ethan. We need help, someone with authority. Ethan nodded. One name came to mind. Rowan Whitmore. As Gregory left, snow crunched beneath his hurried steps. Ethan closed the door and leaned against it briefly, breathing deep as old memories and new fears collided. Sarah touched his arm lightly. You won't face this alone. Ethan met her eyes with steady gratitude. I know. Outside, the sun faded behind clouds again, casting long shadows across the land. Trouble had arrived, but so had allies. And somewhere, Claire Whitmore was returning home, unaware that her fate and Ethan's were becoming intertwined in ways neither could yet see. Soft evening light settled over the Whitmore estate, painting the snow-covered fields in shades of gold and rose. It was a quiet winter dusk, the kind where the world seemed caught between breath and silence. Ethan Caldwell approached the high iron gates slowly, his boots crunching over the thin frost. Anxiety tightened his chest as he walked the stone path toward the grand hall where the Whitmore family had gathered. He had faced battlefields far from home, yet this moment pressed harder on his heart than he expected. The hall was an impressive structure of pale stone and towering windows, built generations earlier. Warm golden lights glowed behind its glass, revealing silhouettes of people moving within. Ethan paused on the final step, his breath visible in the cold air. He adjusted his jacket and squared his shoulders, prepared to confront whatever truth lay inside. When he entered, the warmth struck him instantly. A large chandelier cast shimmering light across the polished floors. Ethan felt strangely out of place amid the refined atmosphere until he saw Claire standing near the fireplace. She wore a long winter dress of soft charcoal gray, her brown hair curled gently around her shoulders. Her delicate features brightened when she saw him, and something inside Ethan eased. Claire stepped toward him, her cheeks flushed. You came, she said softly. Her voice held relief and gratitude, but also worry. Ethan nodded. Sarah told me you might need me here. Before Claire could speak again, Rowan Whitmore approached. Rowan's tall form seemed carved from resolve, his gray-streaked hair neatly combed back. He wore a dark wool coat, and his serious eyes softened only slightly at Ethan's presence. Good to see you, Caldwell, Rowan said. We have much to discuss. Ethan sensed tension beneath Rowan's calm words. The older man's jaw was set, a sign he was wrestling with something heavy. Claire gently touched Rowan's arm, silently asking him to show patience. As they moved into the main room, Ethan noticed several new faces. Among them was Thomas Whitmore, Claire's father. Thomas was a tall man in his early 60s with a commanding presence shaped by years of managing the estate. His hair was silver and neatly trimmed, and his face bore strong lines of leadership and experience. Yet his eyes were gentle, carrying a softness one would not expect from someone of higher status. Thomas approached Ethan with a firm handshake. Thank you for helping my daughter. I am in your debt. Ethan shook his head. Anyone would have helped, Thomas gave a faint smile, as if he knew the humility was genuine. Not everyone would have carried her through a storm. Tonight you stand with us. Across the room stood another man, a businessman dressed in a tailored dark coat. He was in his late 40s with a square jaw, neatly trimmed beard, and slicked-back black hair. His name was Martin Hale, a representative of the investors, seeking to acquire local land. Martin carried himself with an air of calculated confidence, his posture straight and his expression unreadable. He had sharp brown eyes that flicked across the room as if measuring the value of everyone present. Ethan recognized the type instantly, the kind of man who viewed land and people as pieces on a board. Martin approached with a polite smile. "Mr. Caldwell, I have heard much about your property. Perhaps we can negotiate something beneficial for both parties." Ethan felt his muscles tense. His father's land was not a topic for casual negotiation. "The land is not for sale." Martin's smile thinned but remained. "Everything is for sale if the price is right." Before Ethan could respond, Rowan stepped in. "Not this land, not this family." Martin's expression hardened ever so slightly, though he quickly masked it. Claire stepped beside Ethan, unintentionally signaling where her support lay. Martin noticed. His eyes narrowed, but he turned away without confrontation. As the room settled, Thomas addressed the group. "We are here because someone is pushing to seize land that does not belong to them. Ethan has inherited his father's property, and we stand with him." Ethan felt a surge of emotion he did not expect. This was not simply about paperwork anymore. This was about belonging, legacy, and the quiet promise he felt forming between him and Claire. Sarah entered the hall then, bringing with her a small German shepherd that trotted by her side. The dog was called Bruno, a rescue she had adopted a few years earlier. Bruno was medium-sized, with a coat of mixed tan and black, and a small scar above one eye from a past injury. His gentle eyes held intelligence and loyalty, and he walked confidently beside Sarah. His presence eased the tension in the room. Claire knelt to greet Bruno, who sniffed her hand and wagged his tail. Sarah explained, "Bruno dislikes dishonesty. He has a sense for people." She looked directly at Martin Hale as she said this, and the businessman shifted his weight slightly. As discussions continued, Ethan watched Claire closely. She looked tired, burdened by something deeper than the storm. At one point, she slipped outside to the balcony, seeking a moment alone. Ethan followed quietly. The cold breeze on the balcony carried the scent of pine. Claire wrapped her arms around herself and looked across the valley where the moonlight touched the snow-covered fields. "You have been quiet," Ethan said gently. Claire turned toward him, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and longing. "My family is under pressure. Investors, legal threats, everything feels like it is collapsing. And I—" She hesitated, struggling to find the right words. "I do not want to lose the things that matter." Ethan stepped closer, noticing her trembling. "What matters to you, Claire?" She met his gaze, the firelight from the hall reflecting in her eyes. "People who do not run away. People who stay when things fall apart." Her words struck Ethan with the force of something deeply true. His voice lowered. "I am not running." Claire breathed in shakily, her eyes softening with emotion so raw that Ethan felt it stir in his own chest. For a moment, the world became achingly still. Inside, voices grew louder. Rowan called for Ethan. It was time to face the investors directly. Claire squeezed Ethan's hand briefly, a silent plea for strength. Ethan nodded once, returning the pressure gently, then stepped back inside. Tonight would not end in peace, but it would end with clarity. And maybe, deep beneath the winter cold, the beginning of something neither he nor Claire could deny. In the quiet stillness after every storm, there is always a moment when the world feels touched by something greater than chance. Ethan and Claire did not meet because the wind was cruel, or because the snow pushed her toward danger. They met because grace often steps into our lives disguised as hardship, guiding our footsteps toward the very people we need most. Sometimes God works through strangers, through a hand reaching out in the cold, through courage that rises unexpectedly in our hearts. And sometimes He reminds us that even in the harshest winter, warmth will find its way back if we keep our faith steady. This story is not just about land or storms or battles of the heart. It is about the quiet miracles that unfold in everyday life, the ones we often overlook. A second chance, a kind word, a new beginning, the gentle nudge that tells us we are not walking alone. If Ethan could carry Claire through the snow, perhaps we too can carry each other a little more. If Rowan and Sarah could stand up for what is right, perhaps we can be braver in defending the things that matter. And if a man who returned home with a broken past could find hope in the eyes of a woman he barely knew, then maybe God still writes miracles in simple moments. May this story remind you that blessings arrive in many forms, sometimes as family, sometimes as friends, and sometimes as unexpected heroes walking out of a winter storm.